So we look at this case here, right? We have some cross bites in the back, more on the left than the right. It can be challenging. And we have short clinical crowns. One of the most difficult things I used to struggle with a lot with my aligner company before was I would send these cases off and the clinical crowns were already short, and then they would send them back and the aligner trim was even shorter, and then they would tell me, I couldn't place attachments on this certain tooth, or it couldn't be this big because the crown's too short. I love being able to have a aligner that is trimmed gingival of the gingival margin to increase forces, especially on cases with short clinical crowns. It's phenomenal what you can do, just like you can with braces, when you have the ability to place appropriate forces for the movements that you want. Having a stiffer aligner and having that aligner trimmed more gingivally increases the forces that we're able to apply to the teeth, especially from an expansion standpoint. So you're going to see here, we didn't run cross elastics, we didn't do anything like that. We just used aligners to correct this case, and I'm going to show you what that looks like and how we set that up. So this is where her teeth were initially, again, some wear. And you can see this was our actual setup, okay? So 15 aligners on the top, 10 aligners on the bottom. You can see that we did some IPR. We want to avoid creating an anterior interference here. And we've basically corrected this to ideal. We have some rotations that we're working out on the right side. Again, we're making sure we have a little excess overjet in our final setup so we don't create a posterior open bite. And we're derotating the molars here. We're expanding. And we're setting this case up as ideally as we can. You can see we added some bite turbos. We're making sure that those are large enough and incisal enough to hit on those incisors so they'll actually do what they're designed to do. And this is how we set up that case. So here's our 6-month progress. She's worn the aligners well, but we're not completely done. We still have a crossbite on the left side. These teeth are telling us that setting this case up ideally is not enough. We still need to get additional expansion on this case. So again, 6-month progress, you can see we're making improvements, but we're not there yet. So what are we going to do? We're not going to rescan and build in all of the same overcorrections that we already had here. We're going to go ahead and do chairside refinements. You can see that we did 2 here. So our first chairside refinement was just to increase the expansion in the posterior because, again, the teeth were telling us that in order to correct that crossbite, those need to be expanded more. So how do we do that chairside refinement? Let's look at that. We have our plan here. We're just going to grab those teeth after we add the keyframe. You can see here I missed rotating the 7, so I'm going to go ahead and derotate those as well when we do this chairside refinement. And I'm going to grab these teeth and I'm going to move them buccally. And then I'm going to move them buccally a little bit more as we go back. Essentially, I'm just widening out and broadening out their wire. We do this all the time with our braces cases. If we are fighting with the crossbite, sometimes we might wear cross elastics, or we might just grab the wire and broaden it out, or we might put an upper arch form wire in a lower arch form. We'll do something to increase the force to make these wider. So that's exactly what I'm going to do with my aligner case here. I'm going to add this chairside refinement. We're going to grab those teeth. We're going to move them buccally. And you can see here within a matter of sometimes seconds and sometimes minutes, this refinement is done. I don't have to scan the teeth. I don't have to have a whole new setup. I don't have to get the patient back for another appointment after that's designed. This is all done chairside. We're going to order those aligners. Those will come in. She'll wear those. The next time I see her, she'll be on number 19. And we're going to look again, and we're going to do the same thing. All right, so this is our second chairside refinement here. You can see that those 7s I missed. I needed to intrude those palatal cusps. They were starting to interfere with her bite. So let's go back to our practice plan. How do we create that chairside refinement? You're going to add the keyframe, you're going to grab the tooth, and you're going to move up with some facial root torque, those 7s, and moving up the palatal cusps. And that's it. We already have attachments on the facial. They're already engaging. So that is it. When we go back and look at our actual plan on what we ordered, you can see very similar. I just recreated that chairside refinement in a number of seconds there. Now, what did we do on the lower? So here on the lower, you can see this was our initial setup. You can see that we're moving. We needed additional movement of the lower posterior's lingual. So initial setup had the 10 aligners. Now we're going on our first chairside refinement from 10 to 15 aligners. Let's go into our practice case and see how we do that. Very similar to how we added the expansion on the top, we're going to add the constriction on the lower arch. We're going to grab those teeth, we're going to move them lingually, and I'm going to move the front teeth less than the back teeth. We're basically constricting that wire, okay? And we're continuing to place force on these teeth. We're continuing to overcorrect the constriction on the lower and the expansion on the upper. And now we have our first chairside refinement. So the patient wears those, and then she comes back again. And we take a look, and we say, okay, well, what is needed now? Well, let's look at our chairside refinement to see what we did. we went ahead and we still needed additional constriction. So we went ahead and moved those teeth even more. And we can see we added another 4 aligners. So let's go back to our practice case and see how we would do that. We would add a keyframe, we would grab onto those teeth, and we would go ahead and continue to move those teeth lingually. Okay? Essentially continuing to constrict this wire. And then, if you want to correct rotations or anything else at the same time, you can certainly do that. You're going to continue to place the forces on the teeth that are needed in order to get this case finished. You can see we need additional constriction forces here. And we let the patient wear those, and the patient comes back. And then let's look here. What did we need here? Well, we still had a crossbite in the back that we needed to address. So what did we do? Now we went ahead and added some lingual crown tip to these teeth in order to facilitate that constriction in the posterior. Now, in a perfect world, I probably could have expanded more and done the lingual crown tip at the same time. But again, it's difficult to know how the teeth are going to respond, and when you're not used to treating like this, it's hard to know exactly how much you need in order to get the case where it needs to be. But when you add this up in its entirety, you can see that there's not a very high number of aligners for this entire treatment. This is how you recreate that last part. We're going to grab the same teeth. We're going to decrease the torque there, as you can see, and that's going to create the stages necessary in order to move those teeth inward. Okay? Now you can see here that's a lot of movement per stage. So you still have the ability, once again, to go into the velocity and adjust that. So you can see here, and I set this up just to show you can do whatever you want. So obviously those numbers are impractical, 23 degrees per stage. That's not realistic. So we're going to go ahead and hit that control key and select those teeth. You can see 16 and 17 are blue now. You're going to adjust those numbers there on the left side of the screen to be more appropriate. And then when you hit enter, it's going to redistribute those movements according to the velocity that you put here. So now you can see instead of 1 aligner for all those movements, it spread that out into 5 aligners. So the movements between 16 and 20 are the same, and same thing here between 19 and 22, the movements are the same, but depending on the velocity, you can have 2 aligners to do that, 5 aligners to do that, however many aligners that you think is appropriate for those movements that you are putting into the case. All right, so you can see here, we've tipped those inward, and that is going to be her refinement. Now look at how this case is set up. So this is the final setup of what we did on our practice case, and I'm going to show you on our actual case, this was the final setup. So this was after the chairside refinements, what the teeth look like. Now I didn't know that I needed to set the case up like that in order for the teeth to respond in the way that I wanted them to, okay? But this is what was required to get the movements that I needed. And so now when we look here, our final setup was shown up there on the top. You can see all of the overcorrections there, but our actual finish looked like you see below. And this was the patient's final. Again, are we completely done? No. We still have to do a little bit of alignment on the upper right side. We have to settle the bite a little bit more, but these are all movements that can be done without attachments. And so in the patient's mind, she's done, the attachments came off. She's gonna go ahead and wear post-debond aligners to settle the bite, and then she will be finished. So you can see here before with the bilateral cross bites, again, no cross elastics, simply overcorrecting the aligners and being able to use an aligner with force sufficient to be able to develop these arches enough to correct these cross bites, and she's happy. So